Begin the current daf from Shabbos Daf Tezvav. Begin 2 lines down at the bottom of the Yomid, from the top of the Yomid, where our shiur is co-sponsored by Kazakh and Yecheskel, Torah Anytime, and Daf Achayim. And this should be a schus for Rabbi Shloimy for the Chayli Yisrael, and there should be a schus for Yeshuas and Klal Yisrael. And the begin of the Daf Shal Svina should save us from the Gali Hayam that are drowning the world. And Luli Sirascha Shashur Zavadati Ba'anyi, where everyone's looking for something to learn. Those who learn the Daf Yomi every single day, this is the limud that Rabbi Shalom gave us to learn. Mitzvah should be a schus for everyone, both spiritually, emotionally, physically, and for Gans Klal Yisrael. So some ideas we're going to be speaking on today's daf are the 3 arguments that Beisham and Beisil had with each other. We mentioned in the previous daf regarding that it couldn't have been that they were part of the Yud Ches Davar, and that's why we had the contradiction. Who made the Gzeir on Stam Yadayim? We said because they only argued in 3 different places, we're going to discuss what are those 3 places that Shammai and Hill, not Beishamai and Beisil actually, but Shammai and Hill had with each other. Those 3 halachas are going to be, if you make bread, you must separate a portion of it called hafrashas challah, which must be given to the kohen. That is a machlekes regarding Shammai and Hill and others regarding what is that measurement, how much dough does there have to be for the chiv of hafrashas challah. Then regarding disqualifying a mikvah. A mikvah needs 40 sa of water. How much mayim shuvim, drawn water, can disqualify a mikvah? And the third machlekes is when does a woman become a nida in regards to her status previously that we consider for the laws of Tumah Tahara, if we suspect that she was tamei or not. And we have a brisa that listed 5 decrees, one of them regarding that all land out of Eretz Yisrael is considered tamei, and that regards to different halachas which we're going to discuss at length regarding the laws of Tumah Tahara. Additionally, there's halacha that when truma becomes tamei, it must be burned. But generally, you're not allowed to burn truma. Now, if you're not sure, generally we say litlis. You don't burn it and you can't eat it. We're going to discuss halachas that are exceptions to the rule, that even though there is suffix, there is doubt, they're going to give the halacha that we do burn that truma. So we begin the current daf, and the top on Tezvav Menalef, the second line from the top of the Yomid. Gufa, we learned as follows on the previous daf. Amar Rabbi Mishmul, he says, Yud Ches Gazru. There were 18 decrees. This is the Yud Ches Davar, which I was actually thinking last night as I was falling asleep. The Yud Ches Davar, Gazru. The Yud Ches is Chai, the life of Torah. The Dever, the plague, Gazru, from that Gezerah, Mitzvah with the learning of this Yud Ches Davar, we should all be saved from the Dever that's out there in the world. But Yud Ches Gazru, but Yud Ches Nechleku. We said the 18 decrees that they made were initially that these were halachas that they disagreed about the Bisham Beisil. And as we said, that they had in the house, in the upper story, that's where the Bisham was Mon Beisil. I asked the Gemara, but Batani, when the Bride says Hushvu, but that they actually agreed. Says the Gemara, Boy Yom Nechleku. That day they disagreed. Ulamachar Hushvu. And the next day they then agreed, meaning that the Beisil then retracted and agreed to the Beis Shammai. So it's not a contradiction. That day they disagreed, the next day they agreed. Another teaching, Gufa, which we learned in the previous stuff, that Omer of Huna, he says it cannot be that the Gzeira of Stam Yadayim was Shammai and Hill and their students together, because we know it was the students, and we also know Shammai Hill, so the contradiction was who actually made the Gzeira of Stam Yadayim. So he said that Shammai and Hill made it, but they were not Makabel. That was what the Gemara answered. And the students came along later, and they made it, and then the people were Makabel. Because, as the Gemara said, they couldn't have made it together because the Yud Ches Davar, they all disagreed. But Shammai and Hill themselves, not their school, not their academy. The academy disagreed 18 places. Shammai and Hill only disagreed. But Gimel Makaymes Nachal Shammai and Hill, they only disagreed in 3 places. Now the Gemara comes to explain what are the 3 places that Shammai and Hill themselves had a machlekes. So they're all Mishnayos and Masechtas Idyos. The first one says as follows: Shammai Omer. He says mikav, from a kav of flour, which is dalad lug, is the obligation of challah. Challah is a small amount, but how much flour do you have to have? How much dough do you have to have the chiv of hafrasha? It's 1 kav for challah. The Hilloimer, he says, mikavayim, from 2 kav, from 8 log, that's the obligation. What's this machlek? So interestingly, Taisus brings from the Yerushalmi, the explanation of Shammai Hill is because an ephah are 18 kav. The asiras ha'ephah, which the Torah tells you is the shiur of the amount of food that they had in the mun in the midbar, which is the chiv of challah comes from. If you take an asiras ha'ephah milabar, a 10th from the outside, which means that the sum total, if you add on this 10th together, it's going to be a 10th. Contrary to how we usually do a 10th, we do from within. If you do from without, from 18, if you add on the 10th, then it's going to be from 20, is going to be 2 kav. Now, that's the shear that you have to be mafresh challah to hill. So therefore, it's from 2 kav that you have to take off. That's the asir sa'efa. That's the 1/10 of the efa that you have to take off a shear, that you have to take off from that amount of dough, a challah. That's how much food they had in every day of this month. But Shami holds that you have to take off 2 challahs for the omer. Why? Because from that month that they had breakfast and they had dinner. So that's the shear of the dough that they had in the midbar, was each meal's worth. And therefore, according to Shammai, you have to take off from a kav, because from the 2 kav that they had in the daily meal, half of it was for a meal and half of it was in the dinner meal. And therefore, from each meal, you have to separate the shear of challah. That's the machlokes, why it's from either 1 kav or 2 kav. Now, that's Shammai and Hel. The Chachamim, the sages, they disagree. They say, loy kedibri zeh, but loy kedibri zeh. No, it's not like Shammai, it's not like Hel. Ella, and rather, actually, the halacha falls like the Chachamim. Kav u'mertza, a kav and a half. Now, Rashi goes through the explanation, which we'll go through quickly, regarding how do we get to this measurement of a kav and a half, which we're talking about the Rishalmi measurements. There's 3 primary measurements that we're discussing here in our Gemara. What's called the Midbari, the Rishalmi, and the Tzipari. What we're talking about a kav and a half is talking about the kav and a half of Yerushalmi, which are 6 lugin, which are actually 7 lugin, a beya, which is an egg, and the 5th of a beya for the midah midbars, which are the original desert measurements, which are 43 and a 5th eggs, which that's what's commonly known in the halacha as the shear of challah, which that's omer lagalgailas, which was the, like we said, the asiris ha'efa, if you cheshben it milagav, from within, unlike Shammai and Hel, like we explained that do it from milabar. But that's the shear that the Gemara says is chayiv b'challah, is obligated in challah, because the pasuk says arisoi seichem, which, what does it mean from your dough you have to take off challah? Is the amount of dough they had in the midbar, which was the shear of the manna that they had. The thing is, that's the measurement that they had in the midbar, but they added on a 6th, which Mefarshim explained is really a 5th, because we're talking about, as Rashi is going to shortly tell us, milabar. A 6th milabar is really 5th from within, in Yerushalayim. So generations later, when they added on to the measurements, it came out that the 6 midbari were able to fit into the 5 Yerushalmis, because the measurements are bigger, so you could fit in the smaller measurements into smaller quantities, because the measurements have gotten bigger. Now the remaining loig and the egg and the 5th of the egg, that goes into the loig Yerushalmi, because the loig midbari are 6 eggs, go into the 5 larger eggs Yerushalmis. So it comes out that the lug Yerushalmi is missing a large egg, so you put the beya and the chemish beya of the midbari into the beya gedayla of the Yerushalmi. Because, like we're explaining, when we're saying it, we added on a 5th, they add on a 6th, it's really a 5th, because there's a 6th milabar, which they added on to the egg. It comes out that the 6 large eggs is a large leg, which are 6 leg Yerushalmis, which ultimately that comes out, in case you missed that whole cheshbon, comes out to a kav and a half, which a kav is 4 legin, and therefore that's what's known as the famous acronym of Esek Lev. I will give hard to it. Gudu will cut down. Askalav Gudu is the, if you go to the measurements, it tells you how to go ahead and calculate the measurements. That comes out to be a kav and a half. So therefore, that was the measurement that we actually rule like the Chacham. Now, but says the Mishnah further, Mishegdilu Hamidos, when they then increased the measurements again, that's called as Midas Sipari, which there, again, they added on a 6, which means really a 5th. That's a 6th milabar, which is a 5th from within, on the Yerushalmi. So it comes out actually, the 6 lugin are actually 5, meaning 5 quarter of a kav, which that's what a leg is. A kav is 4 legin, so a quarter of a kav is what's a legin. 5 of those, they said chameshes revaim, 5 quarter legs, 5 quarters of a kav, which that's a leg, and this is the halacha l'maisa as it's known, of kemach, a flour, is chayav machal, is obligated in challah. That's the opinion of the Chacham. B'yisim, he says, no, actually, hey paturin, actually 5 legin is actually going to be exempt. Hey va'oid, 5 and a little bit more, that's going to be the shear of chayav, and that's of that amount of dough is going to be obligated in the shear of challah. The reason for that is Rashi explains, is because Rabbi Yossi holds that the midah midbaros, the originally measurements of the midbar, those were larger eggs than we have. And as Rashi points out, we find Rabbi Yossi says in Masechtas Eruvin of Pegimel Beis, how much is the share of a chatzi pras for the halacha of someone who becomes tamei by rabbinic by eating tamei foods? It's shnei beim seichekes. It's not just 2 eggs like everyone else holds. It's 2 eggs that are slightly larger. And the Gemara explains over there, what's the ba'id? It's 1/20th of an egg for every single egg. So therefore, Tezek gives a different interpretation, but because Tezek holds that the shir challah has to be, the shir of the arisa seichem has to be left over after you take off the shir challah. So you have to have a little bit more when you take off the challah, and then you'll remain with that shir. But ultimately, this was the first of the three machlokes that we have between Shammai and Hill regarding what's the shiur of dough that you have to have for shiur of Rosh Hashanah. Shammai said that from a kav of dough, that's the shiur of challah, and Hill said from 2 kav is the shiur. Again, then we brought two different opinions. The Chacham who we actually rule like, which is not a kav or 2 kav, but it's actually somewhere in the middle. It's a kav and a half, which then, when they increase the measurements, it's actually 5 lugin, which is the measurement of the shiur, because it got a little bit smaller the amount because the measurements got bigger. And Rabbi says no, 5 and a little bit more. That's the first halacha. Now we move on to the second halacha. V'idach, what's the second halacha? It's also the next mishnah with the Masechtas Idiyos. Hiloimer, he says, maloi hin, a full hin, which are 12 lug, which is 3 kav, of mayim shuvim, of drawn water, paislam as a mikveh, that invalidates the mikveh, which means to say is, if let's say drawn water, which is not naturally water that just flowed, but rather someone went and drew the water by hand, so if the water falls into the mikveh before the mikveh was completed of 40 sa, that's what we're discussing over here, because if the mikveh was already filled up, then it does not become invalidated. Even if you come and you draw in with pipes and you make it 1,000 sa with vessels, it doesn't make a difference. It's not going to invalidate it because it had the original 40 sa. But we're talking about over here that if it wasn't yet filled up, then this drawn water invalidates the mikveh. The first opinion says, that of Hill, that's going to be 12 lug. Now, the Mishnah explains that hin is not a Mishnaic terminology. It's a biblical terminology. But as the Mishnah says, Shechayev adam leima b'lashon Rabbi, a person has to say in the words of his Rebbe, and the way that Hill heard from Shmaya Vevtalion, who is Rebbeim, were in this wording, therefore he says the word hin. But really that's not the Mishnaic terminology, he's just saying it because that's what he heard from his Rebbe. But that's what the opinion of Hill is, that it's a malay hin. Shammai, he says, no, it's tisha kavin, 9 kavin of drawn water, that invalidates the mikveh. In third opinion, they say no, no, not like Shammai or Hill. So they didn't know what it was. They just knew it wasn't like Shammai or Hill until 2 weavers came Mishahar Ashba Shebishleim from the gate of the dung in Yerushalayim, which in Masechtas Idiyos, the Mishnah explains over there. Why do they have to mention their profession and the place that they came from? Is to say that nobody should hold himself back from coming to the Beis HaMidrash to learn, because there's no profession lower than a weaver. And because from a weaver, you're not allowed to appoint a Kohen Gadol, you're not allowed to appoint a king, as the Gemara says in Kedushin of Beis Hamikdash. And there's no lower community than the Shar Yerushalayim, which is in from the gates of Yerushalayim, than the Shar HaAshpais. And still, from with their testimony, they communicated halacha that decided halacha the sages of the Jewish people, and therefore you should see that no one should hold himself back from learning. But be that as it may, va'idu mishum Shmai Vavtan, they testified in the name of Shmai Vavtan, which actually halacha falls like them, is that shashleish lug mayim shuvim, not like Hill who said 12 lug, not like Shammai that said 9 kavin, but rather 3 lug of drawn water, places them as a mikveh, that invalidates the mikveh. V'kaim chacham as the and the sages fulfilled their words, and they said the halacha falls like them. So the second of the two machlokes that we said between Shammai and Hill is regarding how much water invalidates a mikveh. Shammai says 9 kavin, Hill says molihin, which again means the 12 lug, and the halacha does not fall like either one of them. Now we move on be'idach. What was the third halacha that we said the Shammai and Hill disagree? So it's a Mishnah Masechtas Idiyos. Shammai, he says, Kol hanoshim, all women that see dam, dayan shaitan. It's sufficient the time when they see the dam to make the taharas that they touch tummy. Now there's 2 primary halachas when a woman becomes a nida. There's the halachas of forbidden relationships with her husband, and then there's the laws of Tumah Tahara. We're discussing over here the laws of Tumah Tahara. So saying regarding the laws of Taharas that what she touches as a nida, she conveys Tumah as the Torah has parashas regarding that. That's only from the time when she sees the discharge and onward. Up until she saw it, although maybe she had it before and we don't know, she just noticed it now, still Shammai says it's sufficient that right now that we're assuming that it happened right now. But the Hillaimer, they disagree. They say no, pekida lepekida, that from the last examination till this examination, retroactively, we're going to presume that if she checks today, let's say, and then she finds that she's tar. Then at the end of the week, she checks again, and she finds that, she has dam, that she's tummy. We're concerned for whatever she touched in that interim from the last time she did a bedika, because maybe the last time she did the bedika, she didn't have dam, but maybe 2 minutes later, she then started to flow. She just didn't notice because she didn't check until a week later. So vafiliyam harba, even if it's many days, we have to suspect whatever she touched since the last time she checked, because now we check and she's tummy, that we're suspecting that it's tummy. We're gonna have to treat those things as they became tummy. The third opinion, they say, no, it's not like Shammai, it's not like Hill. It's not like only right now, and it's not like Hill, which we're going back from the last time that she checked, which could have been a week ago, could have been a month ago. Ella, rather, the halacha follows, in the last 24 hours, that will diminish from the last time of checking. And so too, from the last time that she checked, will diminish from the last 24 hours. In other words, there's two times that were mentioned regarding retroactivity when we go after the more lenient of the two of them. That is, if the last time that she checked is more than 24 hours, then we go after the last 24 hours. If 24 hours is more than the last time she checked, then we go after the time that she checked. And therefore we go after the lenient of the two of them. So that was the third one. We mentioned that only 3 places we know of Machlekes Shammai Hill throughout the whole Shas. Says the Gemara, those are the students. Beis Shammai Hill. Shammai Hill themselves only disagreed in 3 places, which the third one was now regarding the halachas of Nida, regarding the laws of Tomatara. Shammai said, the women we only suspect her right now. When she sees it, Hill says no from the last time that she checked. Again, the halacha doesn't follow like either one regarding the laws of Tomatara. It's regarding whichever is the more lenient of, it's not right now, but it's not necessarily from the last time she checked. It's either me'es li'es or it's min bekid lebekid. However, on that the Gemara asks, Besuleka, really? Is there nothing more than these 3 places? But ve'ikad is a Mishnah Masechtas Chagiga that says in the Machlekes Beis Shammai Hill regarding bringing the Dharm and the Davas, donated or vowed karbanis on Yom Tiv, regarding the halacha of doing smicha, leaning on the animal, which you're supposed to do when you bring a carbon on Yom Tiv. Hillel Lismach says, yeah, you do lean on the animal. But Shammai Mishalei Lismach says you don't lean on, which we'll discuss over the Masechtas Chagiga. What would be the problem about leaning on the animal, which you're not supposed to use an animal on Yom Tiv? So that's their machlekes. One thing is we see another machlekes Hillel and Shammai. Says the Gemara, no. Kikam Rav Huna, when Rav Huna said there's only 3 machlekes, and he did not include that Mishnah Masechtas Chagiga, is Heicha Deleka Plukta de Rav Fosa Bahadai, when there's no disagreement with all the great leaders of the Jewish people with them. I mean, the 3 places that Rav Huna said, no one else disagreed. No earlier sages had disagreed. This halacha of smicha, if you lean on the animal, all the Av Bezdins and the Nesiim from the times of Yesi ben Ye'ezer until Hill, as the Gemara there quotes, as in Masechtas Chagiga, they all disagreed about it. It was for generations that they had this machlekes going all the way till Hill and Shammai, and they were part of the machlekes, but it wasn't an original machlekes of Hill and Shammai, and therefore that was not counted. Regarding, so although as we said regarding a carbon brought on Yom Tov, Shammai says Shalei Lismach, Hill says Lismach, but we're saying that's not counted because they're not the only ones that had made that disagreement. But then the Gemara asks, Bod ve'ikar, there's a second machlekes in the Brisa that they do disagree. What's the case? Habeitzer. If someone's harvesting grapes, to go ahead and take them to press them legas in the wine press, because as Rashi explains, if let's say you're harvesting the grapes to make, let's say, raisins out of them, so the liquids that come out of them will not make it hukshul l'kabel. What we're discussing over here is that these grapes are food items. Now, food items are, as we mentioned in the previous daf, liquids can become tummy right away. Food items cannot become tummy right away. They have to become, for hukshul l'kabel tummy, they have to become susceptible. How do they become susceptible? When one of the 7 liquids, what's called yad shach adam, one of them being yayin, the grape juice, that could validate if it touches the food item willingly, desiringly, then that makes the food item susceptible to tumah. So if, let's say, you're harvesting these grapes to make raisins out of them, then the liquid that comes out of them is not going to be maksha because you don't want any liquid. You actually want them to dry up and turn into raisins. So we're not talking about that you're harvesting them to make raisins. We're harvesting them because you're actually going to press them. You're going to want the grape juice that comes out. You're making wine. So Shammai says, when you're just doing the harvesting, Shammai I'm a huksher. He says, the wine that dripped out onto the grapes, when that's going to make those grapes susceptible to tumah. Now, although, look at the basket, even the one that we have drawn over here, it's going to leak out, and it's going to drip from the basket onto the ground. It's a gzeira, as the Gemara is going to explain later on, Daf Yomi, that maybe you're going to make the buckets that you're holding the grapes with buckets that are tarred, and then the grape juice is not going to drip out, it's going to stay in the bucket. Then you're going to be happy of the grape juice that's coming out because you're actually taking it to the wine press. So therefore, even in the case where it actually does drip out, the halacha is that it is hukshul l'kabel tumah. The grape juice that drips out is going to make the grapes susceptible to tumah. Now, they say loy hukshul. No, it's not hukshul because look, it's dripping out. You don't want it, and it does not have that gezerah of Shammai that you might make it with a tarred basket, and you're going to be happy with the grape juice dripping out. There is not hukshul. But one thing is, we see another case that's a machlekes Shammai Hill. Says the Gemara, no, barmi no dahi. That's an exception. That was not counted as a machlekes in 3 places machlekes Shammai Hill because the hasam over there kashasik lehil l'Shammai. Hill was silent to Shammai, and he did not hold his ground in his machlekes. As the Gemara teaches later on in the Perek, on Daf Zayin, that day Hill was subservient to Shammai, and he was silent, and Shammai won. So therefore, since Hill did not stand his ground, we don't consider it as one of the places where he disagreed with him. So therefore, these two are not counted from the machlekes because in the end, Hill agreed with Shammai. Now the Gemara continues, going back to the brisa we mentioned on the previous daf, on the Fidel de Mabez. The reason why we introduced this brisa, which was talking about many different gezeras that were made in the history, was because we ultimately wanted to come to the halacha that Shammai and Hill, they went and made the gezerah on Stam Yadayim, which that was difficult because we said it's one of the 18 things that the students of Shammai and Hill made. And like we just said, you cannot have said that the Shammai and Hill were with their students and they were part of the 18 things, because that's what we just went through. We said, no, they only disagree in 3 places, not 18. So they ultimately had the answer that you're right, that Shammai Hill tried making it, no one accepted it. Then the students came along and then they accepted it. In that brisa, we quoted many different halachas, many of them pertaining to the laws of Tumah, and that's why our Gemara is going to go through at length now and discuss that brisa. Yosi ben Yezer ish treda, the Yosi ben Yechon and Ish Yerushalayim, these two great sages, Yosi, they were Gazur Tumah al Eretz Ha'am, and they decreed that by the land of the nations of the world, anything out of Eretz Yisrael, the land is considered Tameh. It's going to make a person tamei. Valklis chuchis, and regarding glassware, that also is something that could be makabel tamei. And that as the Gemara, is that really so that the two Yosis, they had made this gezerah? But v'arabanim d'shmainim shana, but the rabbis of 80 years before the Churban by Yesheni, which was many years later, as we're going to explain right now, they were gazer, they made this gezerah. How do we know this? Because Dam Rav Kahana, he says, Keshachali Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg. Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg became ill. Sholchulei, they sent him, Rebbe, Amalanu Beis V'Gimel Dvarim. Tell us 2-3 things. Shamarta Mishum Avicha, that you said in the name of your father. Because you're passing on. Tell us these teachings before you pass on. So Sholchulei, he sent to them, Kacham Abba, this is what my father said. Kov Pei Shana Achlei Charva Bai is 180 years before the Churban Bai Sheni. Pashta, it spread out, meaning they started to conquer Malchus Ashra Harisha, the wicked kingdom, that of Rome. Al Yisrael, on the Jewish people. The Romans started dominating Eretz Yisrael 180 years before the Churban Bayis Sheni. Then Peishan Achlei Charva Bayis, 80 years before the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, which that's what we mean to say the sages, whoever they are, 80 years before the Churban Bayis Sheni, they were Gazr Tumah al Eretz Ha'am, they made a Gzeira on that the lands of the nation should be considered Tameh, and also Vaklis Chuchas, they're the one who made that glassware should be able to Mekabel Tumah. Then Memshon actually Charba Bayis, 40 years before the Churban Bayis Sheni, Kosala Sanhedrin. So the Sanhedrin, the high court, they went into exile from the Lishkas Agazes, which was in the Beis HaMikdash. V'yashvach b'Chanuyos, and they went and they settled in this place Chanuyos, which says the Gemara Lamai Hilchas. So what's the halachic relevancy of that they moved places? Rabbi Yisrael Bar Avdimi says limit to say Shleidonu Dini Knesses, that they didn't judge any more laws of penalty. Says the Gemara Dini Knesses, okay, they're giving the laws of penalty. Why does Sanhedrin have to be in the Lishkas Agazes to judge the laws of penalty? Elima rather say Shleidonu Din Nefashis. It means to say that they stopped judging capital punishment, which Tosfos finds a difficulty with that too. But that's what the Gemara says, that for Din Nefashis, that the high court has to be in the Lishkas Hagazas. So you see, it wasn't the two Yosis. It was the rabbis 80 years before the Churban Bayis Sheni. And says the Gemara, if you're going to say, oh yeah, B'Pei Shana, the 80 years before the Churban Bayis, Nami in Huhava. That's when the two Rabbi Yosis lived. They're the ones who were the 80 years before the Churban. Says the Gemara, you can't say that because B'Tanya learned the Brisa. Hillel, the famous Hill that we're discussing, V'Shimon, his son, Reb Shimon, who is the son of Hill, Gamliel, his son, Reb Gamliel Hazakan, V'Shimon and his son Shimon, he's the Reb Shimon, the son of Reb Gamliel Hazakan, who was killed with the Harugei Malchus. He was the father of Rabbi Gamliel, that we generally in the Gemara mention Gamliel, who made it difficult. Reb Shua ben Chananya, the Gemara says in Brachas, he made him stand on his feet. He also was the one who made the Machlekes, Rabbi Elazar ben Horkonis, the Gemara says about Metzia. These sages, Hill, his son Shimon, his son Gamliel, his son Shimon, Naga Nisuas and Lefnei Habayis, they were the leaders of the Jewish people when the Beis HaMikdash was still around, Me'ah Shana. The last 100 years before the Churban Bayis, that's when the leadership of Hill started. And these four leaders of the Jewish people, they led for those 100 years. But one thing we see is that Hill was 100 years before the Churban Bayis. Ve'ilu Yosi ben Yezer ish Treda. V'Yosi ben Yechanan, who we were counting them, that they made the Gzeira of the Tumas Eretz Amim and the glass, have a Kadmi, they were before Hill too, but many generations, as you learn in the Mishnayos Avos. You go through Avos, it says Yosi ben Yezer, V'Yosi ben Yechanan, Yusha Shalayim, it says them, it keeps on passing down. And Hill and Shammai are much later. So if Hill was 100 years before the Churban Bayis, and the two Yosis were much before that, obviously they're not the ones who are the 80 years before the Churban Bayis. So who went made this Gezerah? Was it the Rabbanan 80 years before the Churban Bayis, as we know, or was it that they made the Gezerah? So as you continue to Medbeis, the Gemara answers, or rather as follows: Asu inu. the two Yasis, they came along, and Gazer Agusha, their gezerah that they made was on the clods of earth. What was their gezerah? Lisreif. Meaning, if truma touches the clod of earth from the Eretz Amim, you're going to consider that as tameh, as we'll explain, because the nations of the world, we don't know where they bury people, and there could be part of a dead person in this clod of earth, where they don't make necessarily demarcated areas of a cemetery. And therefore, if truma touch it, we have to presume that it touched something of tameh. You're going to burn the truma because it was the definitive, like we're concerned, as if it touched a dead person. But regarding the airspace, let's say you're in the type of a wagon that you're not touching the earth, but it's in the airspace, then they said they didn't make any concern whatsoever. Now, then the rabbis of the 80 years, Gazer Avir Litlis, they came along, they made the gezerah that if you're in the airspace, yes, they both made regarding Eretz Ha'amim and Lanklis Chuchas. How so? Didn't one make it? Yeah, they made on the gush, that the gush is going to be suspended. They made on the gush lisreif to burn it. We'll see in the maskana. Actually, we're going according to maskana over here. The Gemara originally assumes that they made on the clod of earth to burn, and on the airspace nothing. And there are asra on the beishana on gazer avir litles. Then they added on also regarding eretz amim. What in the airspace that you have to suspend it? That if truma goes into the airspace and there's nothing interrupting in between the truma and the ground, so it's not touching the ground. But if let's say you have an open wagon from the bottom, then it's going to be litles that you're not going to eat it and you're not going to burn it. That's something that they added on. So yeah, they both made regarding the eretz amim, which Tosfos points out. How come the Gemara, as we'll see in the maskana, doesn't talk about anything regarding the glassware? How come the Gemara is not saying what was with that? So Tosfos says that originally the two Yosis made the gezerah on the glassware litles, and at the end, the Chacham 80 years before the Churban, they made the gezerah regarding that you should burn it, as is the maskana regarding the gush of the Eretz Amim. That's the same thing that regarding Klis Chuchas. So yeah, it was both. They made litles and they made lisrif. Now, but says the Gemara, remember, is that really coming to say, as the Bach adds on the word Tchila, that in the beginning, the Chad Gezerah, that of one Gezeris, you're telling me, have a Lisreif, you're telling me, how are you resolving the question? You're saying that the two Yesis, which were many generations before, they made Gezer in Eretz Amim, of the actual clods of earth, that you're going to have to burn the truma that touched it. And then, what did the sages many years later, 80 years before the Churban make? They made on the airspace that litlos, which the Chachamim of the two Yesis didn't say anything about the airspace. They said the airspace is going to be litlos. But you tell me that the initial Gezerah of the two Yesis were that you're going to have to burn the truma? You can't say that. Why not? Because V'amar Ilfa said, the Yudayim, we mentioned this in the previous Daf, the Stam Yudayim, regular hands, Tchilas Gezerah and Lisreif. The initial Gezerah of the hands were that when the hands are going to touch truma, you're going to have to burn the truma. Now the inference of that teaching is Yudayim who did tchilas gezeiras and l'sreif. It's only by the hands that we said the initial gezeir was that you're going to have to burn it. Hamidachrin. But any other the tumas that we made, lie. The initial gezeir was not that you're going to have to burn the truma. So that contradicts what you just said. You just told me that the two Yesis, when they made the gezeira of when the clod of earth from the Eretz Amim touches truma, not only is it going to be litlis, but you said that it's going to be lisra, but that was the beginning of the gezeira. You can't say that. Ula said that we don't have any gezeira that initially was lisra besides Yudayim. But the way you're interpreting it now, it was even regarding the gush of Eretz Amim. So Elorad the Gemara amends the teaching and says, you're right. Also Inu, what happened was that the two Rabbi Yesis came along and Gazer Agusha Litlis. They made a gzeira regarding, and that's how we have it on the slide. They made the gzeira on the ears, on the earth, that if it touches truma, you suspend the truma. We don't know. We're going to treat it as a doubt, and therefore you don't need it, but you don't burn it. But regarding the airspace, that they didn't make a gzeira at all. But then the rabbis later on, which were 80 years before the Churban Bayis Sheni, Gazer Agusha Lisrev, they made the gzeira regarding the earth. That's they added on. Not only is it litlois, but that you have to burn the truma, and also vavir litlois. Also regarding the airspace, that you have to suspend it. Which Tosfos actually says that why do we have to say that the two Yesis said alavir v'leklum? Why can't we say that initially the gezer was on both the gush and on the avir was litlis, and at the end the chacham 80 years before the Churban Bayis they made the gezer on gush lisrev and the avir remained as it was. Tosfos proves from there that, as we find that he proves from a mission in Allah's, that we have to say that initially the gezer was only on the gush and not on the avir. Therefore, one might wonder why is the Gemara specifically saying like that. Tosfos proves that it has to be that the two Yesis only made the gezer on the earth and nothing on the airspace. So therefore, they made the gzeira on the gush litlis, nothing on the airspace, and then the rabbis years later, 80 years before the Churban, they upgraded. They said the gush is even lisreif, and the avir is going to be litlis. However, the Gemara still asks a question on this. It says, Va'akati, but still regarding the clods of earth. That you're telling me that if it touches truma, you're going to have to burn it. How can you tell me that was made by the Chacham 80 years before the Churban, but Ba'usha Gazer, it was decreed years later in Usha? How do we know this? It's not like learn the Mishnah Masechtas Taurus, which again, we're going to go mention the Mishnah, which is going to embrace us. It's going to immerse us. But again, we're bringing in this Mishnah to ultimately ask a question. But once we're doing the Mishnah, we jump in Talmudic style. This time we're doing the Mishnah Masechtas Taurus. Al-Vav Sveikas, regarding 6 doubts. The halacha is that Sorfin Eser Truma, that we're going to burn the Truma, which again, as we mentioned in the introduction, generally, regarding doubts, we don't burn Truma. There's halacha that you're not allowed to burn Truma. If it becomes Tamei, then you have to burn it. But regarding doubt, generally we don't burn the Truma. There are 6 exceptions to this rule, which Taisa explains it might be more than 6, but in Usha they only made in these 6 places, so we're counting these 6 doubts, that you're going to burn Truma if it comes in contact with these 6 doubtful Tumas. What are they? A suffix beis hapras, a doubt regarding a beis hapras. So there's actually machlekes Rashi and Taisus what the case is. Rashi says, if you have a doubt regarding a beis hapras, for example, let's say truma goes into a beis hapras. What is a beis hapras? So Rashi explains, there are many beis haprases. The one Rashi quotes is a field that there's a grave somewhere over here, but we don't know where it is in this field. So it's a doubt. We don't know if the person who's here or the truma is leaning over the grave or not. Taisus disagrees and says that it has to be the other beis hapras of a field that there was a grave that was plowed over, which biblically that's going to be tar, and we're not really concerned for a bone the size of a barley corn. Therefore, it's only rabbinic, because he says if it was the case of, let's say, what Rashi said, that a field that you have a grave here, just you don't know where, that's a biblical doubt, as the Gemara says in Moed Katan Af Hey Beis. So therefore, the Chacham that we're going to shortly quote, how could they say if you're not sure if you touched in Rosh Hashanah you're going to be titled, but the Mishnah says in the 6th parak of Masechtas Taurus that any suffix in Rosh Hashanah is going to be tamei, if it's a biblical suffix. So therefore, Taisus disagrees and he says no. We have to say it's talking about a rabbinic suffix, and therefore it must be told about a case of the not like Rashi says that a grave was lost, but rather it's plowed over. But be that as it may, the suffix regarding a field regarding a dead person, which is just a suffix, that's number one of the cases that we're going to say that you're going to have to burn the truma. It's not just going to be like litleis. Also, another case is valsa, and this is the question of the Gemara from this next case. Valsafik offer haba me'eretz ha'am, regarding the doubt of earth that comes from the nations of the world, that all the offer out of Eretz Yisrael, we're in doubt regarding that they bury their dead people and they don't clearly mark where it is, and there might be the dust of a dead person called rekev in this dust of the earth. That is the earth that we go ahead and we have to burn truma. And another case is Vasafik Big Di Amaretz, regarding a doubt of the garments of Amaretz. All the garments of Amaretz were in doubt. Maybe his wife, who's a nida, because they're not careful, they don't know the halachas appropriately, sat on his clothing. As the Mishnah teaches in Chagig Yevches Beis, the garments of Amaretz are considered medras. Medras is when a nida sits on it, for prushim, those who are careful with halacha. Which Taisa says, you don't have to say like Rashi. He says, because Amaretz, we decreed on Amaretz that they should be like a zav for all the halachic purposes. So he's a zav himself. So therefore, either way, like Rashi says that the wife, who's a nida, sat on his clothing, or he himself is a zav, so he's going to make his clothing into a tumah. But be that as it may, we don't know for sure that he's a zav or nida. But out of doubt, we treat him like that. And vasafek kelim on him, regarding a doubt of vessels that were found, where we don't know what you find in the street, let's say you could keep the vessel, or you touch the vessel, we don't know if it's tummy or not. And vasafik hareikin, regarding the doubt of all spittle. We're in doubt when you see spit and something, let's say truma falls in it, we don't know whose spit that was. It could be that of a zav. A zav spit is an avatuma just like himself, as the pasuk actually mentions the case of spit. And vasafik meriagle admin, the 6th case is the doubt of the urine of a person. Now, this doubt is not similar to all the previous doubts. Rather, here it's even a double doubt, the way Rashi says, which Taisa actually disagrees on Rashi. He says, no, a double doubt would actually not be tummy. But the way Rashi says it is, even if we're in doubt if it is even the urine of a person, because it might be the urine of an animal, we actually have 2 doubts to be lenient. Because A, is it the human urine or is it animal urine? And even if it's human urine, it might be the human urine of a pure person. Which, as the way Rashi explains the Gemara, that this urine of a person was shekineg and meirag lebehema, was opposite the area of the urine of an animal, which that's the chiddush to say that don't say from the fact that this urine is from an animal. So this urine is also from an animal, that it's a double doubt. It could be the urine of an animal, it could be the urine of a person. Even if it's a person, it might be tamei or tar. Still, Rashi learns that this is one of the cases that the suffix is going to be tamei, which Taisus again disagrees. He says, no, why we're saying it's near the urine of an animal is exactly the exact opposite, says Taisus. Because when they're near each other, you could recognize that this is human urine and not animal urine, because you could tell the difference of the urine. If you had the one urine just standing by itself, then you would actually have a suffix sveka, which Taisus says actually we would not burn the truma. Here actually we're coming to tell you that it's only one suffix, because we could tell it's human urine, and then we're not sure is it that of a tamei or a tahar. But be that as it may, these are the 6 cases which the Mishnah says, al vade magoin, if you definitely touch one of these 6 things, let's say by the base of pras, or the earth of the Eretz Amim, it's definite touching, and the Ger says, shuhu safik tamasim, which that's the doubt of its tumah. In other words, you know for sure that Truma touched it, but you don't know if these things are tummy or not, like we went through and we explained all these things. We don't know if the Eretz Amim is tummy, we're just not sure. The Beged HaMaretz, we're not sure if his wife sat in it, we're not sure this kalim, we're not sure the urine, but you for sure touched it, which is a doubtful tumah. That's the halacha we're serving as a truma, that you're going to have to burn the truma. That's the Gemara's question, that you see one of the cases was the gush, the clods of earth, safik afa Eretz Amim, that the halacha is that they're in Usha, as we're going to shortly explain, that was in Usha, they're the ones that made the gzeira that you have to burn the truma. How could you tell me that Chacham 80 years before the Churban, they made the gzeira of Lisreif Agusha? Now, but first, let's finish off the Mishnah. Rabbi Yisrael, he says, actually, Afal Safik Magoin. Up until now, we were speaking about what's called Vade Magoin. You for sure touched it, but that's Safik Tumah. You're not sure if that thing is tummy or not. Rabbi Yisrael says, Afal Safik Magoin. Also, let's say you're not even sure if you even touched it at all. B'Reshus HaYachid, if it's in the private domain, which generally Safik Tumah in Reshus HaYachid, we go L'chumra. Surfing, even if so it's like, the whole thing itself is Safik if it's tummy in the first place. Now you're not sure if you even touched it at all. Still, in Reshus HaYachid, in the private domain, you're going to burn the truma that maybe touched it. For Chachamim, they disagree. They say, no, if you're not sure if it touched it, Reshus HaYachid, in the private domain, Thailand, you're going to suspend it, which that was Taisus' proof that obviously we're not talking about Safik Derais, unless it's Safik Derabanan. And therefore, although it's Safik Reshus HaYachid, you go to Chumrah, here we're going to go to Chumrah that you're telling them we're not going to burn it. Reshus HaRabim, and if you're not sure if you touched it in this thing that it itself is Safik Tumah, in Reshus HaRabim, then tar they're going to be tar. That was the Mishnah. But now that we mentioned the Mishnah, says the Gemara, Va'ama Ula. Ula says, Eilu vav sveik is these 6 doubts, which we taught in this Mishnah that we just quoted, Be'usha hiskinu. They were instituted in the place Usha, which were many years after the Churban Bayis. As the Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah, on Daf Lamed Aleph and Aleph, there were 10 different locations that the Sanhedrin went and the Shechina went after the Churban Bayis, or by the time of the Churban Bayis, and one of them was Usha, which was many years after the Churban Bayis, and one of these things are the Gzeira Lisrev Agusha. You told me to resolve the contradiction, who made the Gzeira of Eretz Amim, because we have the 2 Yesis of many generations before. We have then the Chacham 80 years before the Churban. You're saying they both made the Gzeira on Eretz Amim and the Klis Chuchas. So, you resolved it like this. You said the 2 Yesis, they made the Gzeira on the Gusha of Litlis. Then the Chacham 80 years before the Churban, they made the Gzeira on the Gusha Lisrev. But you can't, because we find years later after that in Usha, they made the Gzeira on the Gusha Lisrev. Says the Gemara, Ella, rather, this is the final resolution. Asi Inu, let's say it again from the top. They, the 2 Yesis, they came along, Gazar Gusha Litlis. Yeah, they made the Gzeira on the clods of earth to suspend, which means say you don't eat, but you don't burn. If, let's say, the clods of earth touch Truma. Again, regarding the airspace, they made no Gzeira at all. Then the rabbis of the 80 years before the Churban, Gazar Idi Ve'idi Litlis. They kept the clods of earth as it was. You're right, they didn't make the Gzeira on the Gush Lesser. They kept the Gzeira on the Gush Litlis like the 2 Yesis. What they did upgrade in the Gzeira was they said that the airspace, if it's in the airspace of Eretz Am, will also be Litlis. Then the Asab Usha, then the 3rd place in Usha, Gazar Gusha Lisrev, they made the Gzeira, as we quote in the Mishnah, of when it touches the clods of earth, you're going to burn the Truma. And the airspace they kept as it is, which is going to be Litlis, and therefore it's not a contradiction. Who made this? And as Taisa explained, the same thing for the Klis Chuchis, that originally was Litlis, then they made Lisrev. But again, that's why it was the, as we quoted in the Bryce in the previous Daf, the 2 Yesis, they were the one who originally made the Gzeira. It's just that they made it for Litlis, and then the Chacham Shmeinu Shana made it also Litlis, but in the Avir, and then in Usha they made it Lisrev. Now, we go back to that Bryce which we mentioned. The second Gzeira that they had made was Klis Chuchis, the glassware that it could be Makabel Tama. Now, says the Gemara, my time because biblically, Klis Chuchis is not mentioned in the Torah. We don't know that it can be Makabel Tama. Why did the rabbis make a rabbinic decree that glass is going to be Tama? So Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, he says, Hayil b'tchilas briyasin. Since the original formation of glass is minachayil, where do we make glass from? It's originally from earth. So Shavin Rabbanik a Klicheres. So the rabbis made an equated glassware to earthenware. So they're both from earth. Now, obviously, their formation is different, but since they come from the same source, so rabbinically we gave it the same halacha as klicheres, which klicheres is makabel tamam and not taira. So rabbinically, since glass is similar in that regard, we made it that it also can become tamam tamam. Now, on that the Gemara has a whole discussion going into the next daf. If you're telling me that the reason why glass was makabel tamam rabbinically, but is because you're treating it like klicheres, then it should have all the halachas as klicheres. If that's the case, they should not have purification in a mikvah like klicheres, because klicheres only can be purified when it's broken. You cannot purify klicheres. It's the one exception. You cannot purify it in the mikvah. So why do we learn the Mishnah Mikvah that says ve'elu chaitzin bekelim, and the halacha files like this regarding the laws of chatzitza. These are considered interpositions in the vessels regarding the halacha of immersing something in the mikvah, which are hazefes, pitch, which is like a type of a tar, v'hamor and musk, beklis chuches on glassware. Glassware is smooth. Glass is very smooth. Now, a person's not bothered by, the way Rashi learns it at least, by mud and something else that sticks in it, because it's going to fall off by itself anyway. Glass, it comes off very easy. But these things that the Mishnah is discussing in Mikvahs, they're very sticky. Pitch, tar, it's hard to get off, and a person is bothered by that if it gets stuck on the glassware. Now, the halacha of chatzitz is only if it bothers you. So these things, although all other things by glassware are not a chatzitza, but these things, it does bother you because you're not going to be able to get it off, that is going to be considered chatzitza. One thing you see, you're talking about chatzitza on glassware, that means to say that obviously glassware you could table in the mikveh, which Taisa addresses. Maybe it's a tefillah that you do when you buy from a non-Jew. Taisa proves that it's not. But be there as me, you see that for the laws of tahara, that the glassware needs to be tabled. What do you mean? That means that you could immerse in the mikveh. But if you're learning it out from klicheres, then the halacha should be that you cannot table it in the mikveh. So that says the Gemara Hachmai Skin. You're right. What are we talking about over here? Although generally earthenware cannot be, and you're comparing glassware to earthenware, it's talking about kugoin shenikfu. We're talking about a specific case. Talking about that the glassware developed a hole. Now, the thing is, when glassware develops a hole, just like klicheres, that actually, the breaking of the glassware purifies it. It's considered pure. When you take earthenware, you break it, the glassware, when it develops a hole, it also purifies it. But the case of avar, then they poured into the hole some lead. Now, once you pour in lead, the glassware is really not a kli anymore because you broke it. It's already considered tar. When you pour in the metal, you now make it as if it's a metal vessel. Because why is it makabel tumah now? The only reason why it's makabel tumah as a vessel is because of the lead that's what's called maimed. It's supporting it. Without the screws, the thing would fall apart. Without the metal, the thing would fall apart. So that's why it's going to have tar in the mikveh, because actually now we're treating it like a metal vessel. Because that he says, he says everything goes based on the thing that maintains it. So here it's maintaining it, that gives it halachic status. The time like learn the brisa, we find this exact case. Earthenware, a glassware vessel that developed a hole, so it's ois kli, it's not a vessel anymore. But then you put into it lead and you filled up the hole. Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg says the machlekes. Remeir says the vessel's going to be able to makabel tumah. Why? Why don't you say that it's nullified from the halacha of a kli, like a regular earthenware vessel that breaks? Because now that he filled it up with metal, he considers that it goes based on the maimed, and it doesn't have the halacha like a kli cheres anymore. It has halacha like a metal vessel. That's why you could table it in the mikveh. But you're right, regular glassware vessel that broke, then that's the only way you can purify it is through breaking. You cannot immerse in the mikveh. Because we learned out the kli zchuches from kli cheres. So why do we talk about a halach of chatzitz in glassware that we see you could table in the mikveh? That's a specific case. When you fill it up with metal, with lead, now we're considering this glass as if it's a metal vessel, and the metal vessel you could table in the mikveh, and therefore that's the opinion of Meir. But Chamatam, they say no, once you break it, even if you fill it up with lead, it's going to be tar because they disagree with this halacha of davar hamaymed that you based on that, and therefore it's just like an earthenware vessel. Once it breaks, and it's not a vessel anymore, and therefore it's going to be tar. Some ideas we spoke about in today's daf, in Shabbos Daf Tezvav, was regarding the 18 things, which we mentioned that although one place says that they disagreed, another place says that they agreed, it's not a machlekes, it's not a contradiction, because first they disagreed, and then the next day is when they agreed. Additionally, we said, because it came into the previous Gemara's discussion, we said that it couldn't have been when we say Stam Yadayim was the Gzeira of Shammai Hill, and when we say it was one of the 18 things, that's not a difficulty. It's Shammai and Hill and their students together, You said no, because we see over there that they disagreed in 18 places. But the thing is that Shammai and Hill, they disagree only in. We see Shammai and Hill only disagreed in 3 places. What were the 3 places? That's how Gemara discussed. These are Mishnais and Idias. What are the 3 places that they disagreed? The first one was a machlekes regarding what's the shiur of a chiyuv of challah. How much dough do you have to separate challah? Shammai says 1 kav. Hill says 2 kav. Chum say a kav and a half. And Yossi says, oh, it's that amount, but a little bit more. We explained from Rashi, either because he holds that the measurements were a little bit bigger, or because, like Tay says, you actually have to be left with the kav and mechza after you take off the challah, which is the shiur of the dough that they had in the desert. He learns up the pasuk from the Yerushalmi that you have to be left with that, and therefore Rabbi Yossi says a little bit more. But either be that as it may, that's machlekes number 1 regarding the shiur of the chiv of challah. Machlekes number 2 was regarding the measurement of mayim she'uvim, how much drawn water is going to validate a mikveh. Hill says if you didn't yet fill up the 40 saw, 12 log is going to be the 3 kav. This is 4 log in the kav. Is how much is going to invalidate a mikveh. Shammai says 9 kav. Chamim, as we rule actually like them, is 3 lugin of mayim shuvim. That invalidates a mikveh. The third machlekes was also another machlekes regarding the measurement of the concern of the tumas of nida lima freya retroactively. I mean, Shammai says when a woman finds a uterine discharge of dam, dayin shaitan. We don't presume it was here beforehand. We say from now on, whatever you touch is going to be tamei. We don't say any retroactive tumah. Hill says no. Last time you checked till this time, we don't know. It could have been that you checked a week ago. Maybe the 2 minutes after you checked, the dam started coming out, and therefore we have to suspect that there was dam in the whole week. Whatever you touched, we're going to have to consider as tummy. Chum said, as the halacha follows in the laws of Tamatara, no. Either one that's lenient, either the last time you checked or the last 24 hours, whichever one is less, that's going to be the halacha of what we're going to be concerned with Tumatara. And therefore, again, those are the 3 places that Shammai and Hill disagreed. Only these are the 3 places in Shas: the shiur of Chiyav Chala, the shiur of Mayim Shuvin that invalidates a mikvah, and the shiur of the concern of the Tumas Nidl Mafreh. Now, says the Gemara, we have 2 other places. We have regarding do you do smicha on Yom Tiv on the animal? Oh, says the Gemara, yeah, but that's different because that was a machlekes of many sages of the Av Bezin and the Nasi throughout the generations. That wasn't an original machlekes Shammai Hill, and therefore we're not going to count that. But you're right, that was another machlekes Shammai Hill. And we have the case of Beitz Lagas, that when you harvest for the grapes for the wine press, that they had a machlekes regarding is that grape juice that leaks out going to make the grapes susceptible to tumah? That's also considered different because Hill did not hold his ground. Hill was silent to Shammai, and therefore it's not considered like one of the places that he disagreed with him, and therefore it's not counted as one of the places that there was a machlekes Shammai Hill. Then we went back to that brisa again from the previous daf that we introduced it, as we said, because we wanted to ultimately get to in that brisa mention that Shammai Hill, what they made the gzer was on Stam Yadayim, which was the Gemara's question, did they do it or did their students do it? But in that brisa we mentioned many different halachas, many of them relating to laws of Tumah. Now the Gemara goes to at length to discuss those. So one of them was Yosef ben Ye'ezer, Yosef ben Yechanan. They made a gzera on Tumah on 2 things, on Eretz Amim and on Kli Zchuches, which is that the earth of the lands of the nations is conveys Tumah, and also, like last week, could be Makabal Tumah. On that, the Gemara had a question. You tell me the 2 Yesis made it, but we have a teaching that says Rabbanan of the Shemainim Shana before the Churban, they made the Gzeira. And as the Gemara pointed out, that we know for sure that Yosef ben Yezer was more than 80 years before the Churban, because Hill was 100 years before the Churban. And look at the Mishnah Navis in the first parak, the 2 Yesis, they were years before that. So the Gemara concludes as follows. The Gemara goes to a cheshbon. The Gemara first says one way, then it rejects it because of Usha. The Gemara says that there were 3 stages in this development. That's the first step was that, yes, first the 2 Yesis came along and they made a gzera on the gusha, on the earth, litlois, to suspend. If Truma touches the earth, we suspend it. That you don't need it, but you don't burn it. And they didn't make anything regarding the airspace. Then the Rabban of the Peishana came along and they made a gzera that both of them, meaning also the airspace, they said is also going to be litlois. And then in Usha, the 3rd place, they made a gzera of the Gusha, which was to be Lisreif. And of course, we know that the original Gezerah couldn't have been Lisreif because only Stam Yidam, like Ilfa said, was Lisreif. So the Gemara ultimately concludes it was in this 3 steps that came to that Mishnah that we quoted that was made in Usha, that on the Gush of the Eretz Amim is we're going to burn Truma, although, like we said, most Sveikis we don't burn, we're only litles, there are 6 places that in Usha they instituted that they're going to burn the truma, one of them being the case that we just discussed, and there are 5 other cases that we discussed that even though they're doubts, we're going to burn truma because of those doubts. And then we went to explain the second halacha of the 2 yasis, which we spoke about the Eretz Amen, but then why did they make a rabbinic tumah, which biblically it's not the case, doesn't mention anything about glassware, why did they say the glass is rabbinic and mikabel tumah? So he said, since the original formation is from the earth, which is just the same source as earthenware, and just like earthenware vessel, makabel tumah, so too we say regarding kli zchuchas. Now, but then the question becomes, how do we say a halacha that you could toivel the glassware, which we know that inferred from the fact that it talks about the laws of chatzitza regarding glassware, but if you're comparing it to a kli cheres does not have any tvil in the mikveh, it could only be broken. Says the Gemara, it's talking about a specific case. The glassware developed a hole, which you're right, that makes it no more kli cheres. But then you poured in lead, and it's going like Reb Meir, as a quote, a halacha that he holds you go based on the maimah, what supports something. What's supporting this vessel? Without the molten lead that was poured in, it wouldn't have a vessel. So now that actually makes it into a metal vessel. And that's why you could table it in the mikveh because it's metal. That's the halacha that we're speaking about immersion. But you're right, a regular glassware vessel is like a kli cheres, according to what the Gemara is saying right now, and therefore you would not be able to be tabled in the mikveh. Thank you to any time for hosting us.